Brisbane and Richmond had two absolute thrillers, Jimmy, last year. Let's take a look at what they were. Last year at the MCG, Brisbane were up by 36 points at half-time and Richmond came home and won by 7 points. And who would forget the final last year at the Gabba where some will say Tom Lynch was robbed, and Brisbane won that final.
Yeah, we had the Arc controversy where he absolutely smashed it over the top of the goalpost, and big Joey Danaher with the hanger in the goal square dropped it and then kicked a match-winning game. But it'll be fascinating. These two in particular, Lloydie, will probably go head-to-head and have 30 each. But you want to have a look at Brisbane's repeat entries that they got, especially last week.
I know they had a shocker against Hawthorn, but I think they're tougher this year. I've actually liked what I've seen from the Brisbane Lions, despite failing at the MCG a couple of weeks ago. And being there live last week, Jim, it was just repeat entry after repeat entry after repeat entry, and they're well coached by Ross Lyon St Kilda, but they couldn't cope in the end, plus 11 entries, and they always were one step ahead, and I liked the performance. Yeah,
they came out snarling in a way. Their performance against Hawthorn was a bit lacklustre, and they didn't have any of that front half pressure. You see in all these repeat entries, the forwards are getting up on the opposition's backs. We see Oscar McInerney, Harris Andrews, all these guys almost 60 metres out from goal and just playing the brick wall.
One of the biggest improvers of the season, he may well be the biggest improver, is Jackson Payne. Look at this record he's got. He's been beaten once by Mitch Lewis in that horrendous game at the MCG 3 weeks ago, but he's taken down everyone, and what he does is he makes things easier for Harris Andrews, who can take the number 2 forward.
Yeah, because he's such a big body, he gets the big match-up, he uses his body really well, he shifts the opposition off the line, and as you mentioned, as we'll see in some of these edits, Lloydie, over near you, highlighting, he's just giving Andrews the opportunity just to watch the football. He's not worried about Max King coming and jumping over the top of him. Andrews doesn't have to worry about a more senior opponent. He can pick which younger opponent he can go on. This is Leicester over near you here on Caminiti, just holding him out. It's almost playing marks up for Harris Andrews at 200 centimetres tall and with great hands. He can just keep the game in front of him. He doesn't have to be pivoting, looking around for his direct opponent. Again, another game of marks up.
So we'd expect Payne to take Revolt and Harris Andrews the number 2 forward.
Yeah, and you can imagine if he gets to set up where he's just in front of the game and he can just move 4 or 5 metres and watch the ball, he's very difficult to stop. The thing I've noticed about Richmond, Lloydie, is they're almost back to their premiership style of football. I know we don't want to go too far back, but the hallmark of Richmond when they're playing really good footy is time in front half, forward half turnovers, that game that we're seeing right here. It's chaos, it's hectic. We see Bolton kick the goal, all the midfielders, and you look at these numbers when the screen pans back. It's just numbers in Richmond's front half. We see Vlosten end up kicking a goal. It's chaos football. The numbers point to it under Minnie McQualter. This is Vlosten inside forward 50 here. Rounds 1 to 6, stoppages, front half turnover game, 18th and 9th. In the last 4 weeks, all those numbers are back in the top 4.
Can you see the chaos game of Richmond upsetting Brisbane at the Gabba?
I think it's going to be a lot closer than we think. I think Richmond have got a lot of fond memories, of course, of the Gabba. Maybe Brisbane just in a tight one.
Yeah, I agree. It could go either way, that one. The second game is the Western Bulldogs and the Fremantle Dockers, who also have some fantastic clashes. I want to look at Aaron Norton and his struggles this year. What's going wrong with him? And I think that he doesn't move enough. The great forwards like Nick Revolt and these types, they just don't stop moving. Hawkins and Cameron, I think he's easy to play against, number 1. And number 2 is the forwards just don't work well for each other. They crash and bang into each other like this, which you just don't see. I want to highlight from this point is how they play, where he gets beaten in the 1v1s, or he's easily to play on versus Geelong. So this is a clip from last year, the separation that 2 guys who know each other, that's Hawkins and Cameron, they just don't get in each other's way. Whereas at the Western Bulldogs, Jim, they just jump into each other, Lobb, Ugle-Hagan and also Norton.
And the key thing about it, as soon as Hawkins doesn't get used, cuts off the lead, repositions, and is constantly asking the defender questions, who's spending time looking for you. You look at both of these guys. The defender, Mackay down here, he's constantly searching and looking for his direct opponent. He's not focusing any energy on coming and intercepting the football.
So that's down one end, and down the other end, the Western Bulldogs also have had their issues with, defenders. So Keith and obviously Gardner and all these, Tim O'Brien, they're coming and going, but I feel like they're getting outmarked a lot in their defence as well, Jim.
Yeah, the big question for me with the Dogs, if they're going to make a run this year, who's going to be that anchor defender that all good sides? You look at Stephen May, Tom Stewart, Vlosten plays it as a bit smaller for Richmond. All the good sides have that anchor defender who can mark the footy. can be this last pivot back here, but they don't get outmarked because they come off to have a direct impact on their opponents.
That's what I was thinking. He should be coming off and smashing that ball and supporting Norton, who was sent back. But watch as we let this one unfold, and they don't come off over the top and smash for each other. And they get outmarked. It's 1v1. So Sheasel comes running through. This shouldn't happen either. You'd expect the Tom Stewart of Loston in another team coming through and smashing. But again, Alex Keith on the last line of defence is getting caught 1v1, so they're just not connecting well as a team at the moment.
And it's going to be even more pertinent for them with Liam Jones being out, because they're going to have to find someone to step up. And Lloydie, who they're going to have to combat this weekend is maybe a good combination for Freo.
Well, Fremantle I've always talked about since Matthew Pavlich. They haven't had a star forward. Well, last week I loved that they sent Jackson down there and said, you've got to stay down there and be our forward. We've got Sean Darcy, who's our ruckman, and they've now got two. This guy, Jaya Miss, is just coming with a rate of knots as a high-quality footballer, and Luke Jackson. So finally, Freo, if they stick to this and say Jackson and a Miss, you're our two forwards, it's a fair presence down there.
Yeah, and I like the fact, Lloydie, that's his core role. We keep forgetting how young Luke Jackson is, and we know key position or bigger players take a little bit while to settle into the competition, but you still need a core role that gets you picked every week. He's going to get picked, but what can he fall back onto all the time? He can still pinch hit in the ruck, he can still be the world's biggest mid, but let's get him bedded down in position.
Unpredictable both teams. Yeah. Who do you like at Marvel?
Dogs.
Dogs, yeah, OK. The last game we're going to look at is at the MCG, Essendon and Port Adelaide. I want to show you something Connor Rosey said a couple of weeks ago about what is making Port so good.
I think we've sort of found what makes us a good side, which is our pressure and our defence, and we've been coming back to that every single week, and that's what's been getting us over the line in most of our games so far.
Here are the pressure numbers, Jim.
Yeah, post-clearance pressure first, pressure factor third, tackle efficiency third. You throw in inside forward 50 tackles, second in the competition for a talented star-studded side, Lloydie. And you look, how about this? Power Pepper coming forward against a strong opponent in Tom Stewart. Next one in. This is a key theme with Port Adelaide. It's the next player coming in, and it's the buy-in. And I know I referenced Richmond before, but when I went and saw the Tigers play in 2017 against the Hawks at the MCG, I was seeing this from the Tigers, and you knew a team had clicked. Everyone had completely bought in. The attack comes off the back of it. But these are all these star players. Houston in great form. We'll see Rosie in these. Right here, he's challenging players. The role players know that's how I keep getting a game every week, and it's infectious.
It's a lot of strategy in footy, but that is what the key to football is. When you all buy in together and you do the defensive things well, and if they do that again, can the Bombers cope? Because I thought they crumbled in Perth last week against the pressure of the Fremantle Dockers. And Jim, they've had a good year, the Dons. They've come a long way under Brad Scott, but as I said, I just didn't feel they coped well under the heat.
Yeah, you hope it's now the new term, of course, we love to use for teams, the mulligan for Essendon, because they have done a lot right. But this is what Port Adelaide will be looking at, and other good sides, is can we put enough pressure to force the next handball and the next handball on? Because we know if Essendon get the football on the outside, they've got some speed and they can cut you apart, especially through the middle of the ground with their ball users. So it's a steep learning curve for Essendon, but if they want to be a good side in the future, you've got to learn to handle the heat.
Sheeds used to take me off the ground for one reason, that was if I was outmarked and I wasn't strong enough in the air. And last week I thought Sam Wiedemann and Peter Wright just weren't tough enough or strong enough. And it was frustrating. You get the ball in, and if you don't push back hard enough or you're not strong enough, it deflates your midfield. And I thought they were poor, and they're going to come up against some very good interceptors this week.
Yeah, and for a number of these guys, Essendon are probably still working out what the combination is too. So not only are you competing against the opposition, you're probably competing amongst your teammates for who gets those two key roles. We know the Bombers love to play the two two rucks, so one of them will spend time forward. You throw in the flexibility of Langford as well. That makes you very tall in the forward line. So one might have to drop out, because this is what Port Adelaide will do, Lloydie, especially with Lear, McKenzie, Houston. All these guys love to drop off and defend.
12 in a row for Port?
Yeah, I think so.
They'll be too good again.